Secretary General, let me ask you whether there's anything in your written response that speaks to the fundamental Russian complaint that their security is threatened because the alliance is so close to their borders, and that asks for an ironclad guarantee that Ukraine would not be a member. You've made it clear, as has President Biden, that a guarantee like that is a non-starter. But in your response, did you, for example, reiterate the membership criteria for NATO, which by most people's judgment would mean that Ukraine would be a distant, if ever, likely member of the alliance? Anything like that that speaks indirectly to the fundamental Russian concerns?
So I think that confidentiality is a precondition for any diplomatic progress or success. So therefore, we have not publicized the document because we are ready to sit down and talk in good faith and also identify avenues. Some of these issues have to be addressed bilaterally, US, Russia, in what's called the strategic talks on, for instance, nuclear issues. But then, of course, from the US side, in very close consultation with NATO allies, as they have done again and again. Some may be discussed in the OC framework, and some may be discussed in the NATO-Russia Council. So different issues have to be addressed in different formats. I also think, for instance, that the Normandy format, where you have Germany and France, is also a format to, for instance, address some of the issues that are more specific on the situation in and around Donbass. Well, what we have made clear is that, of course, to become a NATO ally, you have to be NATO is for North America, US and Canada, and for European countries. That's enshrined in the Washington Treaty. So the first, what I say, threshold to pass is to be a European country. But second, you have to share our values: democracy, rule of law, individual liberty. And thirdly, you have to meet NATO standards. It has to in a way so strengthen transatlantic security. So therefore, when it comes to Ukraine, our focus has been and still is on reforms, on helping them to modernize the defense and security institutions, to meet NATO standards, to fight corruption. And this is the focus, and we have made that clear to Ukraine, but also, of course, to Russia, because this is well known that that's the focus of NATO. But there is a huge difference between discussing when Ukraine can be a member of NATO and to say that we should sign a legally binding treaty excluding any enlargement of NATO, because that goes far beyond Ukraine. That includes, for instance, Finland and Sweden. And one of the things that I think we should all carefully note is that Finland and Sweden, countries which are now currently not applying for membership, they have called very clearly on NATO not to sign such a binding treaty. I spoke with the Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson and the Finnish President Niinistö, and they both conveyed the same message, that for them to see that NATO signs a treaty that makes it impossible any time in the future, forever, for Sweden or Finland to join NATO would actually undermine their right to choose their own path. So this is about a fundamental right for all allies or for all countries to decide whether they want to belong to NATO or not, and that's for the aspirant countries and 30 allies to decide, no one else. That principle we will not compromise on.